Marcus Thompson clutched his phone with trembling hands as he read the text message for the third time. His bank account showed negative $47, his rent was due in 2 days, and his last 3 clients had canceled their weddings due to budget cuts. The 28-year-old wedding planner had built his reputation on creating magical moments for couples, but magic didn't pay the bills in Manhattan. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The cramped studio apartment in Queens felt even smaller as Marcus paced between his makeshift office setup and the kitchenette. Wedding magazines covered every surface. Inspirational mood boards lined the walls, and his laptop displayed an empty calendar for the next 3 months. 5 years of building Thompson weddings had led him to this moment, broke, desperate, and questioning every life choice that brought him here. His phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Thompson Weddings, this is Marcus. Mr. Thompson, my name is Victoria Sterling. I need your services immediately. The voice was crisp, authoritative, with the kind of confidence that came from never hearing the word no. Marcus straightened up, grabbing a pen. Of course, when is your wedding date? Tomorrow. The pen fell from his hand. I'm sorry, did you say tomorrow? You heard correctly. 24 hours from now, I need the most spectacular wedding Manhattan has ever seen. Money is no object. Can you do it? Marcus's mind raced. This was impossible. Even the simplest wedding required weeks of planning. Venues, catering, flowers, music, photography. Everything would be booked. But the way she said money is no object made his empty bank account scream yes before his rational mind could protest. Miss Sterling, I have to be honest with you. A 24-hour timeline is extremely challenging. Most vendors require advance booking and quality venues. Mr. Thompson, I've done my research. Your portfolio shows creativity under pressure. The Delacroix wedding you salvaged after their venue burned down 3 days before the ceremony. The Morrison event you relocated during Hurricane Sandy. You specialize in the impossible. She had done her homework. Those were his proudest moments. The weddings that made his reputation. But this was different. This was asking him to create something from nothing in a single day. What kind of budget are we discussing? Whatever it takes, I can have $5 million transferred to your account within the hour as a starting point. Marcus nearly dropped the phone. $5 million. That was more than he'd made in his entire career combined. He could pay off his debts, save his business, maybe even afford a decent apartment. Ms. Sterling, who exactly are you marrying on such short notice? There was a pause. That's complicated. We can discuss details when you arrive. I'm at the Sterling Industries building, penthouse floor. How quickly can you be here? Sterling Industries. Marcus knew that name. Everyone in New York knew that name. Adrian Sterling, the billionaire tech mogul who'd revolutionized social media and virtual reality. His company's glass tower dominated the Manhattan skyline like a modern-day castle. If Victoria Sterling was related to Adrian Sterling, then $5 million was pocket change. I can be there in an hour. Excellent. Ask for Victoria at the front desk. And Mr. Thompson, bring your best ideas. This needs to be perfect. The line went dead. Marcus stared at his phone, wondering if he'd just received a miracle or signed up for professional suicide. Planning a billionaire's wedding in 24 hours seemed like the kind of challenge that either launched careers or destroyed them completely. He grabbed his portfolio, laptop, and the emergency suit he kept for client meetings. The subway ride into Manhattan felt surreal. Just 2 hours ago, he'd been contemplating closing his business and moving back to his hometown in Ohio. Now he was heading to meet someone who could change his life forever. The Sterling Industries building rose 57 floors into the cloudy afternoon sky. The lobby alone was larger than most venues Marcus had worked with. All marble and glass with a reception desk that looked like it belonged in a 5-star hotel. Everything screamed wealth and power in a way that made Marcus suddenly conscious of his thrift store suit and scuffed shoes. I'm here to see Victoria Sterling, he told the receptionist, a polished woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. Mr. Thompson? Please take the private elevator to the penthouse. Miss Sterling is expecting you. The elevator ride felt endless. Marcus used the time to compose himself, running through potential solutions for the impossible task ahead. Maybe they could do something simple, intimate. Maybe she had connections that could open doors that were normally closed. Maybe this wouldn't be the disaster his rational mind insisted it would be. The elevator doors opened to reveal a space that took his breath away. The penthouse wasn't just an office, it was a work of art. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, modern sculptures dotted the space, and everything was designed with the kind of attention to detail that money could buy. "Mr. Thompson?" Marcus turned toward the voice and felt his world shift. Victoria Sterling was nothing like he'd expected. She was probably in her early 30s, with auburn hair pulled into a sleek chignon and wearing a tailored black dress that probably cost more than his rent. But it wasn't her beauty that caught him off guard. It was her eyes. They held a desperation that seemed completely at odds with her confident phone manner. "Miss Sterling, thank you for considering Thompson Weddings. I have to admit your timeline is unlike anything I've ever handled." She gestured toward a seating area with leather chairs that faced the massive windows. "Please, call me Victoria, and I understand this is unusual. Can I offer you something to drink? Coffee would be great." She moved to an elaborate espresso machine, her movements precise but tense. "Mr. Thompson, what I'm about to tell you must remain completely confidential. I'm not just asking you to plan a wedding. I'm asking you to save my life." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "I'm not sure I understand." Victoria handed him a perfect cup of coffee and sat across from him. "My father is Adrian Sterling. You've probably heard of him." "Adrian Sterling? Sterling Industries?" "The same. What you probably don't know is that my father is controlling. Obsessively so. He's arranged for me to marry someone tomorrow. Someone I've never met, someone chosen entirely for business purposes, a merger disguised as a marriage." Marcus set down his coffee cup. "And you want me to plan this arranged marriage?" "No," Victoria's voice was firm. "I want you to help me escape it. I need a wedding tomorrow, but not the one my father has planned. I need something that will allow me to take control of my own life." "I'm confused. How does planning a different wedding help you escape an arranged marriage?" Victoria stood and walked to the windows, her silhouette outlined against the city skyline. "There's a clause in my father's will and in the company bylaws. If I marry before my 30th birthday, which is next month, I gain access to my trust fund and voting shares in the company. Enough to have real power, enough to make my own choices. But you still need to marry someone." Quote. She turned back to face him, and Marcus saw something in her expression that made his heart race. "Yes, and I've been thinking about that problem for months. I need someone I can trust, someone who won't try to control me like my father does, someone who needs this arrangement as much as I do." Marcus felt like he was missing something crucial. "What exactly are you proposing?" "A business arrangement. You marry me tomorrow, help me gain access to my inheritance, and I'll pay you $10 million. After a year, we can quietly divorce. You'll have enough money to build the wedding planning empire you've always dreamed of, and I'll have my freedom." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. She wasn't asking him to plan her wedding. She was asking him to be the groom. The poor wedding planner becoming the bride's salvation, and in a twisted way becoming the bride himself in this elaborate charade. "You want me to marry you. I want us to save each other. You need money to save your business and your future. I need freedom from a life that's been planned for me since birth. We both get what we need, and nobody gets hurt." Marcus stared at her, his mind reeling. 24 hours ago, his biggest concern was paying rent. Now a billionaire's daughter was proposing marriage as a business transaction. It sounded insane, but as he looked into Victoria's desperate eyes, he realized it might be the sanest thing either of them could do. "What about your father's arranged marriage?" "That's happening at the Sterling estate tomorrow at 6 p.m. By then, if we do this right, I'll already be married to you. Legally, he can't force me into another marriage." Marcus rubbed his temples, trying to process everything. "Victoria, this is huge. Marriage, even a business arrangement, isn't something to take lightly." "I know, but I'm running out of options, and frankly, so are you. I've looked into your situation, Marcus. You're 3 days away from losing everything you've worked for. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story." She was right, and they both knew it. But marriage? To someone he'd met 5 minutes ago? It seemed like something out of a romantic comedy, except the stakes were real, and the consequences could change both their lives forever. "If we did this," Marcus said carefully, "what would happen at the actual ceremony tomorrow?" Victoria's first genuine smile spread across her face. "That's where your expertise comes in. We need to create the most beautiful, convincing wedding ceremony possible. Something that will satisfy legal requirements but also send a message that this is real, this is happening, and there's nothing my father can do to stop it. Marcus looked out at the city sprawling below them, millions of lights beginning to twinkle in the approaching dusk. Somewhere out there were couples planning their dream weddings, taking months to choose flowers and seating arrangements. And here he was, being asked to plan his own wedding to a woman he'd just met, with less than 24 hours to pull it off. It was completely insane. It was utterly impossible. It was also the only chance either of them had at the future they wanted. "Victoria," he said finally, "if we're going to do this, if we're really going to pull off the most important wedding of our lives in 24 hours, then we need to start right now. And we need to do it perfectly." Her smile widened, and for the first time since he'd arrived, Marcus saw hope in her eyes. "Does that mean you'll do it?" Marcus took a deep breath, thinking about his empty bank account, his failing business, and the woman sitting across from him who was willing to trust him with her entire future. "It means we're about to plan the most unconventional wedding Manhattan has ever seen." The next morning arrived with the brutal reality of what they'd agreed to do. Marcus had spent the night in the penthouse guest room, surrounded by wedding planning materials and a growing sense of panic. At 6 a.m., he found Victoria in the kitchen, still wearing the same black dress from yesterday, staring at her laptop screen with dark circles under her eyes. "Please tell me you've found a venue," she said without looking up. Marcus poured himself coffee from the machine, his hands steadier than he felt. "That's our first major problem. I've called every premium venue in Manhattan, the Plaza, the Rainbow Room, the Metropolitan Club. They're all booked, even offered to pay triple their usual rates." Victoria finally looked at him, her composure cracking slightly. "What about Central Park? The Conservatory Garden? Requires permits that take weeks to process. I called the Parks Department at midnight. They laughed at me." Marcus sat down across from her, spreading out his notes. "We have 17 hours left, and we don't have a place to get married. There has to be somewhere. This is New York City. There are thousands of venues. For a wedding? A real wedding that needs to be legal and documented. Victoria, we're not just throwing a party. This needs to satisfy legal requirements, your father's expectations if he finds out, and create a public record that proves this marriage happened." Victoria's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and her face went pale. "It's my father's assistant. He wants to confirm the time for my fitting today." "Fitting? For the wedding dress? The one I'm supposed to wear when I marry Harrison Blackwell this evening?" She set the phone down without answering. Harrison's family owns half the shipping industry on the East Coast. The merger would make Sterling Industries the largest logistics company in North America. Marcus felt a chill. "Victoria, what happens when your father realizes you're not showing up to marry Harrison?" "He'll be furious. He might try to contest our marriage, claiming it was coerced or fraudulent." She ran her hands through her hair, disturbing the perfect chignon. "That's why everything we do today has to be absolutely legitimate. No shortcuts, no legal loopholes he can exploit." Which brings us back to the venue problem. Marcus pulled out his phone. "I have one contact who might help. Elena Rodriguez runs a boutique event space in Brooklyn. She owes me a favor from when I saved her daughter's quinceañera after their original planner disappeared." 20 minutes later, they were in the back of an Uber heading toward Brooklyn Heights. Victoria had changed into jeans and a sweater, looking more like a college student than a billionaire heiress. The transformation was startling. Without the polished corporate armor, she seemed younger, more vulnerable. "Marcus," she said as they crossed the Manhattan Bridge, "are you having second thoughts?" He considered lying, giving her the reassurance she clearly needed. Instead, he told the truth. "I'm terrified. Not of marrying you. That's just paperwork. I'm terrified of failing you. Of planning something so important in so little time that it falls apart. What if I told you I was terrified too? Of what? Of trusting someone I barely know with my entire future. Of betting everything on a plan that sounds insane when I say it out loud." She stared out the window at the East River below them. "But I'd rather take a crazy risk with someone genuine than live a safe life with someone who sees me as a business asset." Elena's venue, the Glass Garden, occupied the top floor of a converted warehouse with stunning views of the Manhattan skyline. The space was smaller than what Marcus usually worked with for high-end weddings, But it had character: exposed brick walls, industrial lighting, and floor-to-ceiling windows that filled the room with natural light. Elena Rodriguez greeted them at the door, a petite woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and an expression that suggested she'd seen everything the wedding industry could throw at her. "Marcus Thompson, you look terrible. And you," she pointed at Victoria, "you look like someone running from something. This should be interesting." "Elena, I need a miracle. We need this space for tonight. I know it's impossible, but—" "Tonight?" Elena laughed. "Marcus, honey, I've got the Patterson wedding tonight. 50 guests. Been planned for 8 months. Marcus felt his heart sink. "Right, of course. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have." "However," Elena continued, "the Pattersons are getting married at 4 p.m. The ceremony and reception should be done by 7. If you can work with a space that's been used for another wedding, if you can start your setup at 7:30, then maybe we can talk." Victoria stepped forward. "What would it cost to move the Patterson wedding to another location? Full compensation plus whatever you'd normally charge for tonight?" Elena raised an eyebrow. "You're talking about relocating a wedding 4 hours before it starts. The logistics alone." "Money isn't the issue. Logistics might be, but money definitely isn't." For the next hour, they worked out the impossible. Elena had connections throughout Brooklyn: a restaurant that could handle the Patterson reception, a florist who owed her favors, even a photographer who could adjust his schedule. It would cost $40,000 to relocate everything and compensate all the vendors, but by 8 p.m., the glass garden would be theirs. "One problem solved," Marcus said as they headed back to Manhattan, about 50 more to go. The next crisis hit when they arrived at the Marriage License Bureau. The clerk, a tired-looking man in his 60s, barely glanced up from his computer. Next, Marcus and Victoria approached the window. "We need to apply for a marriage license. Fill out the forms, provide identification, pay the fee. You can pick up the license in 24 hours. We need it today." Now the clerk looked up. "Today? That's not how it works. There's a mandatory waiting period." Victoria leaned forward. "Isn't there an expedited process? Emergency circumstances? Are you in the military deploying overseas? Is one of you terminally ill? Those are the only emergency circumstances we recognize." Marcus felt panic rising in his chest. Without a marriage license, nothing else mattered. They could have the perfect venue, the perfect ceremony, but it wouldn't be legal. "What if we went to another state?" Victoria asked. "Las Vegas? Somewhere without waiting periods?" "We'd never make it back in time for tonight," Marcus replied. "And your father would probably claim the marriage wasn't valid in New York." The clerk was already helping the next couple. Marcus stared at the forms in his hands, wondering how he'd overlooked something so fundamental. 5 years of planning weddings, and he'd forgotten the most basic requirement. "Wait," Victoria grabbed his arm. "What about a judge? Can't judges waive the waiting period under special circumstances?" It was a long shot, but it was all they had. Victoria used her family's connections to locate Judge Patricia Hammond, a federal judge who'd presided over several high-profile cases involving Sterling Industries. After 3 phone calls and what Marcus suspected was a substantial donation to the judge's favorite charity, they had an appointment at 2 p.m. Judge Hammond's chambers were intimidating: dark wood paneling, law books from floor to ceiling, and a massive desk that made visitors feel like they were being sentenced. The judge herself was a stern woman in her 70s with silver hair and sharp eyes that seemed to see through any deception. "Miss Sterling, Mr. Thompson, you're asking me to expedite a marriage license so you can marry tonight. This is highly unusual." "Your Honor," Victoria said, "there are time-sensitive family circumstances that make this necessary." "What kind of circumstances?" Quote. Victoria glanced at Marcus, then took a deep breath. "My father is attempting to force me into an arranged marriage. Tonight. If I'm already married, he can't legally compel me to marry someone else." Judge Hammond leaned back in her chair. "An arranged marriage?" "Miss Sterling, this is America in the 21st century, not a period drama." "Tell that to my father." "Your Honor, I'm asking for the legal right to choose my own husband, instead of having one chosen for me." Isn't that exactly the kind of freedom our legal system is supposed to protect? For a long moment, the judge studied both of them. Marcus tried to look like someone worthy of trust, someone who wouldn't abuse the power being handed to him. "Mr. Thompson, what do you have to say about this unusual arrangement?" Marcus met her gaze directly. "Your Honor, I know this looks suspicious. A last-minute marriage. A wealthy woman. A man with financial problems. But I give you my word that I will never take advantage of Victoria's trust. This marriage is about giving her the freedom to make her own choices." Judge Hammond made some notes, then looked up. "I'm going to ask you both something, and I want honest answers. Are you being coerced in any way? Threatened? Blackmailed?" "No, Your Honor," they said in unison. "Are you both entering this marriage of your own free will?" "Yes." "Then I'll expedite your license. But understand this. Marriage is a legal contract with serious consequences. Even if this started as a business arrangement, you'll be legally responsible for each other. Don't take that lightly." Walking out of the courthouse with their marriage license felt surreal. In 6 hours, they would legally become husband and wife. But first, they had to pull off a wedding that would convince everyone it was real. "Marcus," Victoria said as they climbed into another Uber, "I know today has been one disaster after another. Are you sure you want to go through with this?" Marcus looked at the marriage license in his hands, then at the woman who was trusting him with her entire future. The scared, desperate wedding planner from yesterday was gone. In his place was someone who had spent the day solving impossible problems and making the unthinkable happen. "Victoria, ask me again in 6 hours. But right now we have a wedding to pull off." Quote, 6 months later, Marcus stood in the executive suite of Sterling Industries, no longer the desperate wedding planner who had answered Victoria's call that fateful day. The transformation was remarkable. Gone were the thrift store suits and scuffed shoes, replaced by tailored clothing and the confidence that came with success. But the biggest change wasn't in how he looked. It was in how he felt about the woman sitting across from him at the conference table. "The quarterly reports show Thompson Sterling Events has exceeded all projections," Victoria said, sliding a folder across the mahogany table. 15 weddings this month alone, with a waiting list that extends into next year. "You've built something extraordinary, Marcus." Their business partnership had flourished beyond either of their wildest dreams. Victoria's connections opened doors that had been locked to Marcus his entire career, while his creativity and genuine passion for weddings brought a fresh perspective to New York's elite social scene. What had started as a desperate marriage of convenience had evolved into the city's most exclusive wedding planning company. "We built it together," Marcus corrected, though he couldn't help but smile at the numbers. "Your family's reputation gave us credibility, but the real success came from understanding what couples actually want: authenticity in a world full of fake Instagram moments." Victoria laughed, a sound that had become more frequent over the past months. "Remember Mrs. Whitman's wedding, when she insisted on having her late husband's vintage Cadillac as part of the ceremony? And you personally drove to Connecticut to pick it up because the transport company wanted to charge extra for the weekend delivery." Marcus shook his head at the memory. "That's when I knew you weren't just playing at being a wedding planner. You actually cared." The conversation was interrupted by Marcus's assistant, Sarah, poking her head through the door. "Mr. Thompson, your lawyer is here for the appointment." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. He'd been dreading this moment for weeks, even though they'd both known it was coming. Their marriage contract had been clear: 1 year, then an amicable divorce. Today marked exactly 12 months since their whirlwind wedding at the Glass Garden. Attorney Robert Chen entered with his briefcase and the kind of serious expression that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. "Mr. Thompson, Ms. Sterling, I have the divorce papers ready for your signatures. Given the prenuptial agreement, this should be straightforward. Assets remain separate, no alimony required, and the business partnership can continue independently of the marital status." Victoria reached for her pen immediately, but Marcus found himself hesitating. Something had changed over the past year, something neither of them had anticipated when they'd made their desperate bargain. "Actually," Marcus said slowly, "I'd like to discuss something before we sign anything." Both Victoria and the lawyer looked at him with surprise. Victoria set down her pen. "What is it?" Marcus stood and walked to the window overlooking the city where their story had begun. "This marriage was supposed to be temporary. A business arrangement to solve both our problems. And it worked. You got your freedom from your father's control. I got the financial security to build my dream company. Marcus, where are you going with this?" He turned back to face her. "Somewhere along the way, between the midnight planning sessions and the client meetings, between arguing about flower arrangements and celebrating our successes, I started forgetting this was supposed to be fake." Victoria's face went very still. "What are you saying?" I'm saying I fell in love with my wife, and I'm hoping maybe she fell in love with her husband too. The silence in the room was deafening. Attorney Chen cleared his throat awkwardly. Perhaps I should step outside while you discuss this? No, Victoria said quietly, never taking her eyes off Marcus. I think we're past keeping secrets. Marcus felt his heart hammering as he waited for her response. Over the past months, he'd caught glimpses of something more than business partnership between them. The way she'd stayed up all night when he had food poisoning from that questionable street vendor. How she'd fought with her father to include Marcus in the Sterling Industries charity gala. The comfortable silences that had developed between them during long days of work. Marcus, Victoria said finally, when I called you that day, I was looking for someone I could trust not to hurt me. Someone who would marry me for practical reasons and then walk away cleanly when it was over. Marcus felt his hopes crashing. And I've complicated that. You've complicated everything. She stood and moved toward him. Because you were supposed to stay the desperate wedding planner I could pay off and forget. Instead, you become someone who remembers how I take my coffee, who argues with vendors when they try to overcharge us, who makes me laugh during the most stressful moments of our biggest events. Victoria. I'm not finished. Her voice was stronger now, more certain. You were supposed to be a business transaction, Marcus, but somewhere between our fake wedding and today, you became the best thing that ever happened to me. Attorney Chen shifted uncomfortably. Should I really be here for this? Yes, Victoria said firmly, reaching for Marcus's hands, because I want him to witness what I'm about to say. Marcus Thompson, I don't want a divorce. I want a real marriage. I want to take your name not just on legal documents, but because I choose to. I want to build a life with you, not just a business. Marcus felt like he could barely breathe. Are you sure? Because if we do this, if we make this real, there's no going back to the safety of a business arrangement. It means trusting each other with everything. I've been trusting you with everything for months, Victoria replied. I just didn't realize it until now. Marcus looked at the divorce papers on the table, then at the woman who had transformed from a desperate stranger into the center of his world. Mr. Chen, I think we're going to need different paperwork. The lawyer smiled for the first time since entering the room. What kind of paperwork? The kind that makes a fake marriage real, Victoria said. Is there a legal process for that? Well, technically, your marriage is already legally valid. What you're talking about is more of a personal commitment. Though, Chen paused thoughtfully. You could renew your vows. Make it official in your hearts the way it already is on paper. Marcus and Victoria looked at each other, and suddenly both were laughing. Another wedding to plan, Marcus said. Think we can do better than 24 hours this time? I think we should take our time with this one, Victoria replied. Plan it properly. Make it perfect. With Elena's venue again? Definitely. She'll never let us live it down if we go somewhere else. 3 months later, the glass garden was transformed once again, but this time with the luxury of proper planning. The same brick walls and industrial windows, but filled with white roses and soft lighting that created an atmosphere of elegant intimacy. Their first wedding had been about escape and desperation. This one was about choice and love. Marcus stood at the altar in a tuxedo that actually fit, watching Victoria walk down the aisle in a dress she'd chosen herself, not because it matched someone else's vision of what a bride should be. Elena Rodriguez officiated, having gotten ordained online specifically for the occasion, and their guests included not just business contacts and family friends, but the vendors and colleagues who had become their chosen family. Do you, Marcus, take Victoria to be your wife for real this time? Elena asked with a grin. I do, Marcus said, and meant it more than he'd ever meant anything. And do you, Victoria, take Marcus to be your husband, no business arrangements or escape clauses required? I do, Victoria replied, her voice strong and certain. As they kissed, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought them here. He'd answered a desperate phone call, expecting to plan someone else's wedding, never imagining he'd end up living his own love story. The poor wedding planner who had become the bride in a fake marriage had transformed into a successful businessman who'd found real love. But the most remarkable transformation wasn't his. It was theirs. Two people who had married for convenience had discovered that the best things in life often came from the most unexpected places. So, Victoria whispered as they danced their first dance as a real married couple, Any regrets about answering my phone call that day? Marcus spun her under the lights of the city skyline, in the same venue where their story had begun, surrounded by the life they'd built together. Only one, he said with a smile. I wish I'd answered it sooner. As the music played and their guests celebrated around them, Marcus Thompson realized that sometimes the most beautiful weddings were the ones that began with impossible deadlines and ended with forever. The billionaire's wedding planner had indeed become the bride. Not through desperation or business arrangements, but through the most powerful force of all, genuine love that grew from the most unlikely of beginnings. Later that evening, as the last guests departed and the cleanup crew worked around them, Marcus and Victoria found themselves alone on the rooftop terrace overlooking Manhattan. The city lights sparkled below them like diamonds scattered across black velvet, the same view that had witnessed their first tentative conversation about an impossible plan. You know what the strangest part is? Victoria said, leaning against the railing in her wedding dress, her veil long since removed and her hair flowing freely in the night breeze. What's that? A year ago, I thought freedom meant being alone, having enough money and power that I'd never need anyone else. I was so focused on escaping my father's control that I didn't realize I was building my own prison. Marcus loosened his bow tie and rolled up his sleeves, finally comfortable after the formal ceremony. And now? Now I understand that real freedom isn't about being alone. It's about choosing who you want to be with, and having them choose you back. She turned to face him fully. You gave me something I never expected to find. What's that? A partner, not someone who wants to control me or use me for connections or money. Someone who sees me at my worst. Remember that meltdown I had over the Davidson wedding cake disaster? And still chooses to stay. Marcus chuckled at the memory. 3 months ago, their biggest client's wedding cake had collapsed 2 hours before the ceremony. Victoria had cried actual tears of frustration, something he'd never seen from the composed billionaire heiress. But instead of falling apart, they'd worked together to create an alternative dessert display that the bride later said was better than her original vision. I remember you calling every bakery in 3 boroughs, Marcus said. And when that didn't work, you drove to your grandmother's house in Westchester to get her antique cake stands. And you sweet-talked that celebrity chef into making individual soufflés in record time. We saved the day because we were a team, not because either of us could have managed it alone. The memory sparked another realization for Marcus. You know what I learned this year? I spent so long trying to prove I was good enough for this world. Good enough for wealthy clients, fancy venues, high society expectations. But success wasn't about proving anything. It was about finding my place in it all. And where is your place? Marcus gestured toward the windows of the glass garden, where Elena Rodriguez was directing the cleanup with her usual efficiency. Building something meaningful with people I care about. Creating moments that matter for couples who trust us with the most important day of their lives. And doing it all with the woman I love by my side. Victoria reached for his hand, her engagement ring. A simple solitaire they'd chosen together, nothing like the ostentatious stones her father would have preferred, catching the light from the city below. Marcus, can I tell you something I've never told anyone? Always. The night before our first wedding, I barely slept. Not because I was nervous about the legal implications or worried about my father's reaction. I was scared because for the first time in my life I was putting my fate in someone else's hands, someone I barely knew but somehow trusted completely. What made you trust me? Victoria smiled, remembering. It was something small. When we were leaving Judge Hammond's office, you held the door for an elderly woman who was struggling with her walker. You didn't think about it, didn't make a show of it. You just helped her because that's who you are. And I thought, this is someone who notices when others need help. This is someone who won't hurt me. And was I right to trust you? You've exceeded every expectation I had, Marcus replied honestly. Not just as a business partner or a friend, but as the person I want to share every victory and challenge with. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. The conversation was interrupted by Elena's voice calling from inside. You two lovebirds need to get out of here so I can finish locking up. And Marcus, you still owe me dinner for all the stress you've caused me this year. They laughed, gathering Victoria's train and heading back inside. As they collected their belongings and said final goodbyes to Elena, Marcus reflected on how much had changed since that first frantic call to this venue. The drive back to their apartment, a spacious place in Manhattan they'd chosen together, not the penthouse where their story began or Marcus's cramped Queens studio, was quiet and comfortable. They'd learned to enjoy these peaceful moments between the chaos of their demanding business. "So," Victoria said as Marcus pulled into their parking garage, "what's next for Thompson Sterling Events?" "Well, we have the Morrison anniversary party next month, the Chen wedding in the spring, and I'm pretty sure Mrs. Patterson is going to ask us to plan her daughter's engagement party." "I meant what's next for us, not the business." Quote. Marcus parked the car and turned to look at his wife, his real wife now, in every sense that mattered. "Honestly, I'm looking forward to finding out. For the first time in my life, I'm not desperate to get to the next milestone or terrified about what might go wrong. I'm just excited to see what we can build together." Victoria smiled. The same expression that had first made him realize his feelings for her had shifted from professional to personal. "Good answer. Because I'm planning on keeping you around for a very long time, Marcus Thompson." "Is that a promise or a threat?" "Both," she said with a laugh, leaning over to kiss him in the quiet garage of their shared home. Their story had started with 24 hours to save two separate futures. It had become a lifetime to build one together, one day at a time, one wedding at a time, one moment of unexpected love at a time. The poor wedding planner who had answered a desperate call had found more than financial security. He'd found his home in the most unlikely place of all, in the heart of the woman who had needed saving just as much as he did. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.